No mai haere mai, ki te tine hui, ki ora koutou. Great to see you all this morning on this last day of July. Welcome, welcome all of you. Ko Jennifer Leahy, and welcome to these ACE adult teaching modules. It's great to see a few of you who've been before and some of you who may be new. So special welcome to those of you who are new to your first session this morning with me talking about the ACE adult teaching standards, and this is one of the modules that focuses on the teaching standards. This is a karakia that I was recently learnt myself from Te Tahia when I worked with her on the masterclass for teaching adults and Thai. Both the three of us worked together, and Tahia shared this karakia that her uncle, Te Ururua Flavel, had shared with her, and I thought it was a lovely one about this time of year. He pō, he o, tākiri mai te ata, koriri ngā manu, ka o, ka awatia, tihei Moriora. Indeed, it is daylight, and I hope it's a great day wherever you are in the motu. So as I said, this is one session of 12 that I'm delivering throughout the year that focuses on the ACE teaching standards. Today's title, as you know, is about trust talk, strategies to forge strong bonds for effective learning. And shortly, you'll see how that's going to take shape throughout the session. That's a little bit about me and my background there, and it's my privilege to work with the teaching standards and to advise the ACE sector about the use of those. And you can find the teaching standards on the website for ACE Aotearoa. They're a really good guide for how effective I am as a tutor. If I'm looking, I look at the standards and think there are 3 standards and think, do I do each of these standards, or the indicators rather, because they're broken down into 17 indicators, do I meet the indicators whenever I'm teaching? So what I've done in this series is breaking it down, and this one is around the learning environment, and I'm specifically talking about the 2 standards, 3.1 and 3.2 there. So last time I talked quite a lot about 3.1, so today I'm talking more about 3.2. Thinking about how each of us foster trust, respect, and cooperation with and among learners, but keeping in mind how we make our learning environment as effective as possible. And in accordance with good adult teaching practice, I will be drawing on your experience throughout the session in this hour, and give you an opportunity to talk to each other about some of the issues that I'm going to raise shortly, and share your experience of your practice, because that's what the most exciting thing is, to hear from each of you. So our kaupapa, this is what we're looking at today. In particular, I'll give you a guide of what I'm going to work through. So I'm talking briefly, of course, about all of these issues. Please know that it is just an hour, and I have tried to condense the information that I know about teaching adults and the research that I've found around these issues, around trust, respect, cooperation. Quite a big chunk around effective learning, and then a chance at the end for your own personal reflection and thinking about, so what might be something new that you might take forward into your practice after this session. What ideas have you heard from other people? What ideas has it reminded you of? What ideas has it prompted you to consider? And I am interested in your opinions, first of all, in this graph, or bar graph, if you like, here. I don't know if it is a bar graph. Anyway, these boxes here about effective learning. So these were some ideas around what makes up effective learning. And as you can see, they're all very important, but I thought it would be quite good to start with what one is important to you. Which of those would you put at the top? Would it be safe, or would it be challenging? Now, there's no right or wrong. Remember, here are 5 ideas about effective learning, and each of them are important, but maybe one is more important to you. I think for me, inclusive is important, and that probably stems from my background teaching women in prison here at Christchurch Women's Prison, to ensure that all women were included and consulted whenever learning happened, because often they were powerless women, powerless learners, and for me, inclusion was important. And I want to talk about some research that I found here. So this is a graph around effective learning environment. Now you'll see the two sides of the graph. um, it looks a bit blank. I'm going to fill it out shortly. So if you look at the two sides, one side you'll notice is around safety, and there's a range there from low to high. And the next part of the model at the bottom shows challenge from low to high. So this is a model that's showing the balance between the two. So here's the first one that comes in here. So if we have an effective learning environment that's, we call it cozy, it's safe but not really challenging, adults don't tend to really learn much in this environment. So I know there's going to be always differences of opinion around this, but I thought this graph was quite interesting for me to think about what makes an effective learning environment. Let's have a look at the next part. So the next bit is around, if you have low safety and low challenge, sometimes for learners it can become incredibly boring, because there's low, it means that you may not keep them engaged. And this might speak to some of you who wrote earlier that you felt engagement was the most important thing as far as an effective learning environment was concerned. Let's take a look what happens next, as you can see there. So this time we've got high challenge, but low safety. And hands up if any of you have been in environments like this. Lots of challenge, but low safety. Certainly, I know I have, and it's really difficult. It makes me and other adults, according to this research, disengage and be unwilling to take risks. Okay, so then let's now look at the most optimum, which is when there is a balance there between safety and challenge. It makes sense, doesn't it? But I liked this model because it did really identify the importance of ensuring that it's not just about cozy learning where we all feel totally safe. There has to be that element of challenge, as long as it's not too high, so that adults feel that they can continue to learn. So that's, we'll move on to another model. That was one model that I thought was useful for considering effective learning environment. The other model is this one here. And again, it talks about effective learning this time. And I think for me, again, I like a model which is simple because it's just a reminder at a quick glance, these are the things that A, I do, or B, I need to remember to do. And I think for most of you, I'm sure that you will identify with the orange box at the bottom, because you will all be people working with learners at times where you're building amazing relationships with them to enable them to learn. So I have no doubt that each of you are effectively teaching and your learners are learning because of the relationships you build with them, because that's often one of the key differences between ACE educators and other educators in the tertiary sector. You go out of your way, I know, to personalise the learning, to know your learner. I thought the other 5 were good reminders for me about effective learning, is that when I'm teaching, it's important that I remember to ensure that I'm clear about next learning. So that could be what else they could go on to, talking about pathways. It could be I might give them extra reading, maybe I give them extra links, but it's a good reminder to be as effective as possible. That's very similar to promotion of further learning, so not keeping it in isolation, as in here we are today and we're learning this, but talking about what can happen next. I like the one at the top here, clarity about what is to be learnt. You'll notice, always put a kaupapa slide or talk at the beginning of any time I meet with learners. I talk about what I'm going to cover. And I think this helps signpost people to know, she's nearly near the end, so it's nearly over. I don't know, that maybe that's just me as a learner, but I find it useful to actually know where the session is going. For me, if I don't have clarity about what I'm going to learn, I can feel a little bit confused and go off task a bit. And I think many of our learners feel like this as well. So I always try to be really clear so people have a signpost of where they're going with their learning. The next one is around assessment literacy, and for me, I took that as a reminder to always be considering the assessment of learning. So this is both in a formal way and a summative way. So as in, formative, beg your pardon, and summative. Formative meaning I might be asking questions, doing little cahoots, checking in along the way of the learning. Summative being a way that I might assess at the end by some sort of quiz, some sort of assignment, some kind of presentation, some kind of portfolio. So again, to be effective, there needs to be some assessment of what the learner has learned. So I found that a useful prompt as well, because all of these prompted me about the things I know and have learnt about, but need to remember. There's so many things we need to remember, isn't there, when we're teaching? And then the final one, active reflection, that's always important for me as well, to think about at the end of any teaching, so what? What could I do better? What could I change? What bit worked? What bit didn't work so well? What are the bits that I might add to if I was to do the session again? So that's just another model, as I said, for thinking about what makes learning effective. But let's have a chance for you to talk now. And I have 3 questions here. The first one is about trust. What do you do to build trust with your learners? Do you do these kind of activities, where you do the trust fall? What is it that you do to build trust? So there's going to be 3 questions, and you'll have a chance to chat in breakout rooms about these 3. The next question is about what do you do to build respect with your learners? And I quite liked this graphic. It sums it up, doesn't it? If we respect our learners, they respect us. And then the final one is around cooperation. And some of you may know I like the old jigsaw puzzle activity for a group activity where you put information on a A4 sheet, break it up into jigsaw pieces and get people interacting. So cooperation is another idea here about effective learning. How do you encourage your learners to cooperate? So I know there's 3 slides there, 3 different questions, but if you could just keep these visuals in mind when you go into your breakout rooms now, can you please discuss how you build trust, how you build respect, and how do you build cooperation? So maybe take a piece of paper and just write, or post it or something, or your phone. If you're like me, I may get to the breakout room and forget what I meant to do. So please write down those 3 words. What are you doing to build that trust with your learners? What do you do for respect? And what do you do about cooperation? How do you encourage cooperation? Great, welcome back. Great to see you back. Thank you, everyone, and I'm sure you had a productive conversation, meeting people from different places around mainly the South Island this time. That's just informed me. And I am aware, looking at the lists there, that many of you will be working perhaps just with one-on-one people too, and which is equally important, of course, to build trust, to build cooperation and build respect. But some of you may be working with groups. And I'm sorry I didn't ask you to prepare to feedback, but does anyone feel like feeding back something that they picked up from talking in the 10 minutes you've just had in the breakout rooms? Was there something that really stood out and you think, oh, it'd be great to share this with the rest of the group? Because that's really a great way for us to all learn about the importance of cooperation. Are you doing activities, set activities for cooperation? Are you doing set activities for trust building and equally for respect? What sort of things did you talk about? Who'd like to share? Just briefly. Thank you. The power of the greeting in different cultures, of the power or inviting the greeting. Yes, that's a great way to encourage that opportunity for trust and cooperation. And really probably respect, I guess, importantly.
I think we talked about the importance of openness and sort of that relationship building on an interpersonal level.
Great, thank you. Yeah, important to do that, to have the relationship building. Yeah, thank you. Great, thank you, Nor, for answering all questions and handling difficult clients. Yeah, that really builds respect, is to make sure you answer a question, and if you don't know the answer, I think it's often good as an educator to say, I don't know the answer, but I'll find out. And handling different clients, that's a really sign of the rest of the group trusting you. If you can handle a difficult client with respect, that trust will come from the rest of the participants. Making sure everyone is included, cool, in the conversation, very much a part of cooperation.
So
Thank
we
you.
also learned a bit about each other, but
Yeah,
about trust and respect, we just kind of revolved around creating a safe place that's non-judgmental,
yeah,
that we treat people with kindness and like our shared humanity, our humanness between
lovely.
each other. And also we talked about the way we engage with our students. So like that tells a lot about how much trust they can put in us. For
Great.
example, if we responded quite harshly or rudely, that's
Yes.
really going to ruin trust. So
Yeah,
always,
yeah.
thinking about how we respond and
Yeah,
what we
I think
say.
that's really important there. And even as adults, the adults will look to the educator to be modelling
Mm,
kindness, modelling courtesy, and modelling best approach and
yeah.
care about other people. And if we do that, then our learners will follow. Yeah. So it's still really important. I mean, a lot of people talk about the importance of the educator with children's lives, but it's just as important for young people and adults, yeah, as well, throughout. Great, thank you. Thanks very much for your feedback there. Okay, let's just move on now to a little bit more about the session around trust and effective learning. So this is my question that I posed to myself from preparing for this session, is how to ensure that learning is effective. So we've talked about some three key components, certainly trust, respect, and cooperation. But what else can we do to ensure learning is effective for our learners? And I've used some research here to guide these next 8 slides. So what I'm going to talk about is each of these and how they ensure that learning is effective with the learners we work with. So I'll go into detail here on them, but you can see the 8 there that I'm talking about. And I'm sure many of those 8 you'll be familiar with and are not new to you. Now, this one I did find an interesting one to start with because for me, sometimes this is an afterthought, but I always think looking and finding out what it is that learners need is really helpful for helping me set the objectives for what it is that I'm teaching. Um, and also making sure that I'm really clear with expectations to learners so that they know what's coming, they know what I expect, and they will feel hopefully as motivated as possible because I've got a sense of what it is that they need. So sometimes I might just do this prior to working with the group if I have that opportunity, but more often than not, it's on the first session that I might ask them what it is that they want to learn in the session. So there'll be degrees of formality with needs analysis. Some people will do a needs analysis, which could be a form, a poll where people give you some feedback. Some might be a one-to-one interview, some might be a questionnaire, but some may also be as informal as writing on a post-it note what people want. But I do think it is key to find out what the learners are there for in your session to be as effective as possible. The other thing is providing constructive feedback, and of course, many of you will know how important it is for the learner to get a sense of their progress so they can change it up or not, depending on what feedback they get. But importantly for adults, they like to know how they're going. They want to get a sense of the fact that, they've got what their strengths are, and they want to know how they can improve. That's the other part of it. They want to have a sense of this is how I improve because I've had this feedback. So constructive feedback is another aspect of effective learning. And I'm not assuming you don't do these things. I just find it useful for myself to revisit some of the ideas around each of these concepts to help remind me of the things to do in my teaching. Okay, on to the third one, and this one will be one you're well familiar with about the importance of relationships. And as we know through so many research studies, and particularly in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we have a lot of research indicating that when the relationships with Māori are positive, effective learning will happen. But it's with all adults as well that learners learn best when they enjoy positive relationships with each other, but importantly with their teacher. So that means it's following on from what Leah and her group talked about. It's very much the same. It's about being caring educators, about being non-discriminatory, and making sure that everyone has a kind of a cohesive sense of belonging within the environment that's inclusive. As I said earlier, this is where ACE educators excel. I know you will be doing this really well with your learners wherever you are, in whatever context. I thought this was interesting. I just found this quote from the research I was reading. It was a UK document, and this educator, the National Teacher of the Year, said this quote: "Why should a student show an interest in our classes if we do not show an interest in them? Show them you care. Student relationships must come first." And I thought, yeah, that first part of that quote I really liked. It's like, why should they be bothered if we don't care about them? And I know for me, that's happened many times in my learning journey. That I can tell that the teacher, the educator isn't bothered about who I am as a learner. I'm just there paying my money. And so this is where I think ACE educators really have huge strengths in the way that they work with their learners. They really show their learners they care. Cultural safety is an important aspect for us as educators in Aotearoa, New Zealand, because it's about addressing disparities and looking at how Māori learners can feel valued, can feel respected, and can feel supported in their cultural identity. And for some people, this might mean that they want to do some extra learning around this to be culturally confident. But it is important that the environment is one where Māori learners and Pacifica learners in particular feel respected, valued, and supported about their own cultural identity. And this hasn't always been the case. And that's why cultural safety is one of the key ideas here around effectiveness. This one again is one that I'm sure you'll be very familiar with, because you know that adults learn best when they engage. And that was evident at the start of today's session when so many of you talked about engagement. And that's where adult learning can be enhanced by using all those kinds of interactive activities where people feel there's lots of cooperation, collaboration, and shared learning. And that's one of the key ideas around effectiveness for adults there. So just getting to the end now. And again, this came up earlier today, isn't it? The idea of a safe space for learners, ensuring in particular that it's physically and emotionally safe. And once again, this links in strongly to the idea of cultural safety. I've used the work of Graham Smith, who is one of the contractors for Ako Aotearoa. He talks a lot about the importance of this cultural safety for Māori learners in particular, but equally it is for any learner to create a space that's inclusive and free from discrimination and harassment. And some of you, I know, noted that at the start of today's session too. And of course, each of us are trying to be a good educator. We try to listen, we try to do what we have been talking about earlier, is valuing, we're showing respect, and we're trying as much as possible to have strong relationships with each of our learners. The final one here of the points that I want to talk about is the idea of reflection and self-awareness. And so the first point here about self-awareness connects in strongly to the idea of cultural safety. So it may be at times that our own assumptions and biases may impact on our teaching practices. And so that's when it's important that we might seek out further professional development opportunities to find out about a Māori culture and history in particular. But if we have that self-awareness, so I'm talking here about cultural safety, but self-awareness is just as important about areas that we may need to improve on. And so that's where reflecting on our teaching and having an opportunity to be aware of how we have delivered a teaching session is really useful. So we can get that from evaluation from the learners, but we can also do that by reflecting ourselves, asking ourselves, as I said earlier, so what? What did the learner learn? Did they engage as much as I wanted them to engage? Did they feel as safe as I wanted them to feel safe? Did they cooperate? Did they collaborate? Are all of those things happening that we talked about earlier as far as an effective learning environment was concerned? Did they feel safe? Did they feel challenged? If we go back to our original, one of the models earlier today. So we're coming to the end of our session today, and this is an opportunity for thinking about the session, for reflecting on the session, and whakaro, that's what that means, and then pātai is around, do you have any questions? I've got a couple of reflective questions here. The ones I found, and I thought, oh, these are interesting, that's why I included them. And this was from the TEC site, actually, around relationships with learners. And they asked these questions here. In what ways do you build positive relationships with your learners? Could you set aside more time each day to connect? So that bit in particular, that last question, because of course we as ACE educators build positive relationships, but that next bit I thought, oh, could I do more? Could there be time set aside each day to connect? So just have a think about that one for yourself. Okay, and then the second question I liked too was, how do you care for learners as culturally located human beings? I thought that was an interesting terms to put there, culturally located. What other steps could you take? So again, this is a challenge inviting us to reflect on the way we work with our learners and think about, is it safe? Do they feel safe? Do they have a comfortable level of challenge? Do they feel that we're treating them well? And doing all of the things that we talked about, the 8 steps earlier. So that's just a couple of reflective questions there for yourself to think about, and maybe that's prompted some ideas. And then we'll move to this last slide before we have karakia to close today. This next step was, what ideas do you want to think more about from today's session? Just to recap, we've talked about trust, we've talked about respect, we've talked about cooperation, and talked about effective learning environments, thinking about how do we forge strong bonds for effective learning. What is it that we do? It's also, Tracy, you're thinking about cultural safety for our clients. Yeah, in the references page, which you'll get with the PowerPoint slides, you'll see the link to Graham Smith's information there. He's got some good ideas about cultural safety. Mandy, you're going to think about how have people implemented these ideas in an online learning context. That's your question. Okay. Anyone got any answers to these ideas here? To that question, sorry. How have people implemented these ideas in an online learning context? I'm hoping, Mandy, that you might get some ideas about what I've been doing that might be useful to include people. There have been online learning environments that people haven't felt included. I know, even though you haven't had a chance to talk, just by inviting people to write their name in the chat can be useful. Breakout rooms can help people feel that sense of cooperation, and hopefully, opening your video from Noho is a useful idea as well. I think the more engagement over time online can help. So there have been sessions that I think the breakout rooms can help, but there are sessions where I've used the whiteboard or done polls. Polls are quite a good way too. I hope that's given you some ideas, Mandy. Let's have a look. So GM, one of my reflections generally was around dignity for adult learners. I find it enhancing for confidence for learners. Yeah. Thank you, GM. That's important. Yeah, the dignity always of the adult learner and how difficult it often is, and what an effort it's often taken for people to come to an adult learning session. But thank you very much for your participation today. And I will just close with karakia. This one is an opportunity to summarise what we've done. Hopefully there's been some understanding together, and together we've learned. So, mea karakia tātou. Unahia te pō whiri marama. Te mōkea te ao whatu tangata. Tātai ki runga, tātai ki raro, tātai aho rau. Hui e, taiki e. There are the references that I talked about earlier there. So you've got some ideas around cultural safety, as I said there, from Graham Smith, the second one there, but also some ideas about positive learning, assessment, and putting student relationships first, and designing learning for adults. So some different ways that I've got information there from.